This lesson is titled The Sabbath Controversy. We're going to take a look at the controversy over the Sabbath in Jerusalem. An unnamed feast in Jerusalem, which was probably the Passover, marked the beginning of the second year of Jesus' ministry. For a year, his miracles and apparent disregard for Jewish traditionalism had infuriated the Pharisees. Even though their antagonism manifested itself in Galilee, it was restrained because of Jesus' great popularity in the north. Now that he was in Jerusalem, the Pharisees had opportunity to assail him with the full brunt of their hatred. There was no institution among the Jews more highly regarded than that of the Sabbath. Beginning with sunset on Friday, announced by 3 trumpet blasts from the temple and synagogue, it ended on sunset on Saturday. On Sabbath, all food must be prepared, all vessels washed, all lights kindled, and all tools laid aside. And there were restrictions laid down in the Mosaic law. But the rabbis had elaborated from these a very vast array of injunctions and prohibitions, making of the Sabbath law a veritable bondage. It was almost, literally impossible to keep the Sabbath. Moses said, "Thou shalt not do any work." And the rabbis made out a system of 39 works which, done, rendered the offender subject to death by stoning. Derived from these, quote, father works were numerous descendant works. And so one of the father works was plowing, and a son of this was digging. And so lengthy rules were formulated about what kinds of knots one might tie on the Sabbath. The camel drivers and the sailors' knots might not be tied or unloosed. 2 letters of the alphabet might not be written together. To kindle or extinguish a fire was a great desecration, not being justified even in case of emergency or sickness. The Sabbath had become a grievous burden by the thousands of such restrictions and rules, which are too numerous to mention. However, Jesus performed miracles on the Sabbath. Jesus healed a paralytic on the Sabbath. It was on a Sabbath day that Jesus encountered a paralytic lying near the pool of Bethesda. And for 38 years, this man had laid there among the great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, of halt, of withered, who waited for an angel to come and trouble the waters so the first one in the pool could be healed. And as he had no one to assist him, the paralytic's hopes of healing were always frustrated. And Jesus saw the man and he asked, "Will you be made whole?" And the man answered and showed his utter hopelessness. But Jesus replied, "Rise, take up thy bed, and walk." And immediately the man was healed, and he obeyed the command of the Lord. Those who saw him walking didn't rejoice at the miraculous healing. They didn't give glory to God. Instead, they accused the man of violating the Sabbath. It was absolutely crazy. The former paralytic simply replied, "He that made me whole, the same said unto me, Take up thy bed and walk." He could not, however, identify the miracle worker because Jesus had withdrawn into the multitude. Jesus later found the man in the temple, and he said unto him, "Behold, thou art made whole. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come unto thee." The man was apparently offering a sacrifice for his desecration of the Sabbath. From Jesus' statement, one may conclude that the paralysis was the result of sin. The sin could have been unthankfulness, as there's no record of the man expressing gratitude for his miraculous healing. Further evidence of the man's unthankfulness is given in his report to the Pharisees, stating that Jesus had been the one who had healed him. And therefore did the Jews persecute Jesus, and they sought to slay him because he had done these things on the Sabbath day. The identification of Jesus as the miracle worker led to his being summoned before the Sanhedrin to give an account for his disregard for the Sabbath. Jesus replied that his Father continued to work, and so did he. And this reply infuriated the Pharisees even more, because in their opinion, it was bad enough that Jesus had violated the Sabbath, but the blasphemy of making himself equal with God was far worse. Jesus' claim to deity so enraged his enemies that they plotted to destroy him. And although they understood his claim to be God, they did not understand that he was God manifested in the flesh. Nevertheless, Jesus gave several witnesses to prove his claim. He had the witness of John the Baptist. He had the witness and the testimony of his own works, the witness of the Father, the witness of the Scriptures, and the testimony of Moses. You may want to write these things down. I'll mention them one more time. These are the witnesses that prove Jesus' claims of deity. The witness of John the Baptist, the testimony or the witness of his own works, the witness of his Father, the witness of the Scriptures, and the testimony of Moses. Stubborn unbelief, however, blinded the eyes of his enemies. The real reason for their rejection was that they were unwilling to come to Jesus to accept life. Or in the words of Jesus, "You will not come to me that you might have life." They had no real love for God in their hearts, but were more willing to accept a false Messiah who came in his own name to receive glory of men. Jesus said, "I am come in my Father's name, and you have not received me." Jesus' disciples also plucked corn on the Sabbath, which infuriated the Pharisees even more. It was probably the following Sabbath that this controversy arose. The disciples were walking through a field and they plucked the corn to eat. And this was in keeping with the law that allowed a hungry man to pick grain along a pathway to satisfy his hunger. The Pharisees, however, did not view this to be legal. They said that it violated their tradition about the Sabbath. Jesus defended his disciples based on the following points. First of all, the example of David eating the tabernacle showbread, which was normally reserved only for the priests. Secondly, the priests who labored in the temple on the Sabbath were blameless in their service. How much more should his disciples be blameless in his service, since he was greater than the temple and hence greater than the Sabbath? There was also the words of the prophet Hosea found in Hosea 6:6. There was the superiority of man to the Sabbath, since God made the Sabbath for man and not the man for Sabbath. And then also, of course, there was the final reason, and that was the fact that Jesus was the Lord of the Sabbath. Jesus also healed a man with the withered hand on the Sabbath. Following the discussion, Jesus departed and he went into the synagogue, and there he saw a man with a withered hand. And seeking to accuse him further, the Jews asked whether it was lawful to heal on the Sabbath. Jesus answered with an example. "What man shall there be among you that shall have one sheep, and if it fall into a pit on the Sabbath day, will he not lay hold on it and lift it out? How much then is a man better than a sheep? Wherefore is it lawful to do well on the Sabbath days?" The Pharisees taught that it was lawful to save a life or prevent death on the Sabbath. Their silence showed that they were caught in their own trap, and his enemies were again defeated in argument and shamed into silence, even though they had come confidently hoping to find some basis of accusation against Jesus. Jesus then commanded the man with the withered hand to stretch it forth, and immediately the hand was restored, once again proving that Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath.